Right then, so let's get straight into it and start off with the Telegraph back page and talking about, well, England primarily, but also Marcus Rashford, who secured that last place for Manchester United. But let's focus, shall we, on Gareth Southgate and the news conference that he held ahead of England's upcoming Euro 2024 qualifiers over the international break. And just having a look at this piece by Sam Wallace, Gareth Southgate has warned that future England managers will have to select players from the Championship if homegrown numbers continue to fall in the Premier League. He launched an outspoken critique of the Premier League, saying that the record-breaking spend in the January transfer window by clubs had diminished the chances of game time for English players, and added that the English game faced an ethical question over the 10,000 boys in the academy system and whether or not there is a realistic chance of them having a career. Wow, this is quite strong stuff, isn't it? Jonathan, if I could come to you first on this. I mean, does Gareth Southgate have a point? Do you agree with what he's saying here?
Well, I mean, it's a point that really could have been made at any point in the last 30 years. And in fact, England managers have been making this exact point. And yet somehow, English players continue to come through and English players continue to thrive. I think, there is this perception in this country, by which I mean England, that English players somehow have to play in the Premier League. I mean, if the competition is too fierce, if you're not getting opportunities, go abroad, go drop down a division. We've seen the likes of Jadon Sancho and Jude Bellingham thriving abroad. Kieran Trippier, I think Marcus Edwards. You see what he's done at Sporting. There doesn't have to be a reason why England players necessarily have to be playing domestically. How many Moroccan players were playing in their domestic league? How many Argentinian players who won the World Cup are playing in their domestic league? If the talent is there, football is kind of it's a very fluid market. It will come through. It will be found.
OK, so not so much concern from you, Jonathan. What's your take on this then, Miguel? Do you think it is as stark as the way that Southgate is painting it?
Well, it is a potential issue, and it's connected to some of the other subjects we're going to be talking about on the show today, which is the internationalisation of the Premier League. I mean, the one thing I'd say it's different to the last 30 years just because of the fact that England in the last decade has essentially gone through the overhaul that Spain did 20 years ago, that Germany did 20 years ago, that France did. And the academy started to produce really high-class players that should be capable, that are capable of playing in top divisions. But that's happened at the same time as the Premier League has basically, this isn't by now an old point really, but it's what Southgate is getting at, I think, that the Premier League is basically a Super League in all but name. It's essentially an international league based in England. And because of the amount of money in it, it's a concentration of all the best talent from around the world. And it's interesting, of course, that's happening at the same time as Brexit and the effect of players on players there. But at the moment, it has resulted in English players being squeezed out. Which is somewhat ironic, given that the country is finally producing players of that sort of class.
But, I mean, I'll come back to you, actually, Miguel, on this point that Jonathan raised. I mean, you do have players now trying their luck abroad. I mean, ironically, Fikayo Tomori is one who, a lot of people have been watching this season at Milan. He has gone abroad, and others like Sancho and Bellingham have done it in the past. Isn't it not also a good test for these young players? Maybe early in their careers, maybe earlier than they would have expected, for them to try it out in some of the other great leagues in Europe?
But this is a connected issue, and that would have been brilliant up until even 5 years ago. But as we're sort of seeing in Europe, now I know only 2 English clubs have gone through to the quarterfinals, but that did feel a little bit freakish because Liverpool drew Real Madrid and Tottenham have been on such strange form. But really, in terms of overall strength, it is for once very true that the Premier League is far above any other league. And even if you talk to even foreign managers who are in the Premier League now, they say they question whether, say, great form in the Bundesliga or in Serie A is as translatable to the Premier League as it used to be because the gap is becoming bigger. And it is a potential issue now. And I do wonder as well, we've obviously had this very welcome trend where Jadon Sancho and Jude Bellingham have been developing in the Bundesliga. But with the direction of travel of European football, I do wonder how long that will continue and whether, as Southgate has pretty much alluded to, they start to actually drop down into the Championship for that sort of development rather than foreign leagues.
Let's just look at the current England squad that's been selected by Gareth Southgate. I mean, he's played a little safe here in terms of the players he can pick from for these upcoming qualifiers. First away to Italy in Naples and then at home to Ukraine. But of course, the headline is Ivan Toney, isn't it? Landing an England call-up despite FA charge over £262 Betts, what did you read from how Gareth Southgate answered this question in the news conference today, Jonathan, about Ivan Toney? And of course, as it says there, this case is still live. He has accepted some of these breaches, but is contesting others.
Yeah, it's quite curt, almost truculent, Southgate today. He's certainly come out after the World Cup with a slightly more belligerent mindset. It feels like, on Toney, he basically said, well, it's there's an ongoing case. It's nothing to do with me. He's still eligible to play for his club, which I think is fair enough. But there is there is obviously an ethical dimension to this, and Southgate knows this because he suspended Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood for breaches of discipline in Iceland. Admittedly that was on international duty, but it's kind of, when he says you have to pick players based on form and ability alone, he has showed in that instant that it's not quite the case. And so when you're playing someone like Ivan Toney, who has this thing hanging over him, I mean, it's he's almost on a hiding to nothing, really. You are kind of inviting questions. You're sort of inviting an extra scrutiny on him, and same with Kyle Walker, obviously, who has this kind of police charge hanging over him. By picking these players, he's leaving himself, no pun intended, slightly exposed.
Okay, Miguel, in terms of this England squad, the makeup of it, 225 players who will be going to playing in these two games potentially. Anyone who is in who shouldn't be? And is it too safe for Southgate, or actually is these the kind of games where you don't want to be taking too many chances?
Well, I mean, obviously eyebrows have maybe been most raised at Harry Maguire and Mason Mount, given how little they've played for their club teams. But I suppose this is the kind of constant balance that Southgate has to strike, and it's about form, but it's also about specific roles he has in the team and who he feels he can rely on. So during the World Cup, I mean, we were sat with him in England's base in Qatar, where he went in pretty much an impassioned defence over Harry Maguire, where he basically said England have no centre-half like him. So regardless of the situation at Manchester United, the team need him. But that will raise all the more questions when you've got a situation where Raheem Sterling, who has obviously been playing regularly for Chelsea, if not to the level that he was at Manchester City, or Trent Alexander-Arnold have been left out. But I mean, just picking up from what Jonathan said as well, in terms of kind of Southgate's belligerence, which probably does kind of tie in to some of these decisions as well, in that if this is to be his last campaign, as I suppose everyone expects now, whether he just kind of he maybe doesn't take the kind of more external. Now, I suppose he would argue that he never did do this, but it was always, I suppose, a feeling that he would take in maybe external considerations when it comes to picking players. But now, because it is that last campaign, he might do exactly as he pleases, and maybe perhaps the better way to put it is he'll be a lot less kind of defensive about picking someone like Harry Maguire and leaving out players who he just doesn't think fit what he wants for England.